Today we're talking about two main things, and that is, should you eat carbohydrates and do you actually need to eat carbohydrates? Those two things. Make sure you stay until the end of the video. It's a short video today and I promise you're going to get a lot of value from this. So straight away, do we need to eat carbohydrates? The answer is no. If you cut all protein from your diet, you would die. If you never ate any protein, you would die. If you didn't eat any fat, you cut all fat from your diet, you once again would die. If you cut all carbohydrates from your diet, you wouldn't die. Your body could use fat as fuel instead of using carbohydrates, use ketones. Having that said, it doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't eat carbs. So that's what the main point of this video is: who should eat carbs and who shouldn't, and the effect carbs have on the body. But it is good to know that you can cut carbohydrates and live without them. I want to now cover two main things about carbohydrates. So the first thing is, do we need carbohydrates as energy? Because we know that we need protein to build muscle, to repair anything in the body. Protein is the only substance that is going to allow your body to recover and regrow. We know the function of that. We know the amino acids in protein builds back muscle, grows new muscle. However, most people think that we need carbohydrates as an energy source. And that is true that carbohydrates fuel you throughout the day. They are used as a fuel. However, there are other fuels. You can use protein as fuel. You can use fat as fuel. Fat is usually a longer sustainable energy source. Ketones are a very good way to run your body. In fact, really the best way to run your body. So does that mean I'm saying you shouldn't eat carbohydrates? The answer to that is no, I'm not saying that. We're going to talk about who should eat carbohydrates a little bit later in the video. Before we do, the next point I need to make about carbohydrates is that there are two different types of carbohydrates. You have complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. I promise for our beginners I'll make this very simple, no pun intended, but simply, no pun intended again. What simple carbohydrates are things like sugars. They get into your body very quickly and give you very fast energy. It's why even athletes and healthy people might do a 100-meter sprint and eat something like a Mars bar before that sprint. It's because the sugars in that Mars bar is going to give you that fast releasing energy. It's not healthy, it's not good for you, but in the moment, that 10 minutes, that 15 minutes is going to get straight into your body and you can use that energy straight away. Now the problem with simple sugars, simple carbohydrates, is that they often cause a crash because they spike insulin so high. They give you that quick boost that spikes insulin, that has to come back down again, and that's usually when you crash. So they're not often the best sources of carbohydrates. They're very high on the glycemic index. They can be useful post-workout if you want to spike insulin for an anabolic effect. We can talk about that in another video. If you are eating carbohydrates, the type of carbohydrates you most likely want to be eating for most of the time is complex carbohydrates. That's carbohydrates such as potatoes, sweet potatoes, oats. They give you a little bit more of a slower releasing energy opposed to that quick burst. Essentially, they have more fibre and take longer to digest. Now we've covered the basics about carbohydrates, and I hope that's given everybody a better understanding, particularly our beginners. The answer to the question, should you eat carbohydrates, is still a maybe. Now don't click off the video because I'm going to help you out by going through some scenarios, and those scenarios will tell you whether you should eat carbohydrates or not. So the first scenario is you're bulking up and you want to build muscle. In my personal opinion, you should eat a lot of carbohydrates if you're bulking up and trying to build muscle, particularly towards the end of your bulk. As your body gets used to eating more calories, adding more carbohydrates is only going to help you. Now you can build muscle without carbohydrates, it's just going to be more difficult. The beauty of eating carbohydrates when bulking, and one of the things that I will personally do, is I'll usually keep my protein around the same, my fat around the same when I'm bulking. My calories will obviously increase significantly when I'm eating more because I want to eat more to gain weight, but it's usually just carbohydrates. And the best thing about this is, when you eat more carbohydrates, when you increase those carbs, you're going to get a way better pump in the gym because glycogen is stored in your muscles. The more carbohydrates you eat, the more vascular you're going to look, the more forearm veins you're going to have. Your muscles will look fuller and bigger even though they're actually only the same size because you're eating more carbohydrates. So if you're bulking up, I don't think it's ever a good idea to eat low carbohydrates. So the next question, should you eat carbohydrates or not if you want to lose body fat, if you want to get ripped or just lose some weight? Maybe you're obese and you've got some weight to lose, what should you do? So this is where you have to do a little bit of work on your own. You have to do a little bit of experimentation. For me personally, I always eat carbs when I'm cutting weight. If I'm trying to get a six-pack, if I'm trying to stay lean, I'm still eating carbohydrates because The key is to eat in a calorie deficit. If you want to lose body fat, the only real thing you need to do is eat in a calorie deficit. So it doesn't really make any difference whether you eat carbohydrates or not. For me, I don't like a low carbohydrate diet. You may enjoy more fatty foods and you might not enjoy the carbohydrates as much, and so you might want to actually do low carbohydrates. That's your choice. There are some examples where I would actually eat a low carbohydrate diet. For instance, and this is not medical advice, this is just what I would do for myself. If I had cancer or I had a family member who had cancer, I'd recommend low carbohydrate diets because cancer does feed off carbohydrates and sugars. So that's a bit of information there that you might want to consider, but I'm just telling you what I would do. This is not actually advice. That's advice your doctor should be giving you, not me. This is not advice, and please don't listen to that. That's, like I said, what I would do. The other example is if you're obese, if you're 300 pounds, there's a good chance you're diabetic or you are pre-diabetic. Like if you are 300 pounds, you have insulin resistance and you are pre-diabetic, you are close to becoming diabetic. So you might want to lower those carbs. The reason is because your insulin is out of control. You're eating a lot of foods and you're eating a lot of carbohydrates. So I would recommend lowering the carbohydrates. That doesn't mean eating no carbohydrates, but I do think lowering the carbohydrates is going to help you when you're borderline diabetic. I do have a video I recommend you watch next, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but I'm also going to share with you some of my favourite carbohydrates to get you started with as a reward for staying until the end of this video. So some of the ones I recommend is rice. I personally just like white boiled rice. I don't want to go brown rice or anything like that. I like potatoes, I like sweet potatoes, I like oats, I like pasta. There's some really good carbohydrate sources to start with. The next video you're going to want to watch is one that's on screen right now, and that is should you eat low-fat diets and the effect that low-fat diets have on the body. I just want to teach you and get you to learn about all these macronutrients and the effect they have on the body, so you're much more well equipped. If you're more interested in just losing body fat and building muscle, I will leave another video on screen that you might be interested in opposed to that, or you can go and watch both.